Okay, so I've got my building structure starting to come together. I haven't put the roof on the top level yet, so you can still see the columns that come through on that level. And I just want to show you my section so that you can see I've left a gap between the top of the column and the floor above. So I'm going to measure using the ruler there from the top of my column to the floor above, and you can see it's 420. Now, don't be confused by this. I'm just going to go to another file so that you can see how it will be in the end. So we've got here the floor joists and the beams that you can see there. So these are the joists and these are the beams. And I'm going to have to close this file and... Oh no, sorry, there we are. Just have to get this window to stay put. There we go. Okay, I have to move this across. That recording software is causing some problems. There we are. So, again, you shouldn't have to do this. I just want to show you, again, the section so you can see what the measurements are going to be. So I'm going to measure the beams. They're quite deep. They're 400. And then the joists are 150. Okay, so I'm going to close this file. If the window will stay put. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's up to you, but you need to decide. So you need to keep the joists, but you don't need to show them. If that makes sense. Because if you don't have the joists, what's going to hold your floor up? So, yeah, it's up to you. So if you don't show them, then you can put a ceiling in. I'm going to do both. Do it both ways. So you can see how it works with both options. Okay, so the first thing is that I need to put a beam in. So I'm just going to point out something that you may not have used yet. On the Structure tab, you've got all of these tools for structural engineers. And they're really good when you need beams and columns and other things like trusses. You do have tools in Revit to make those things. They work really well, but again, they're set up more for structural engineers, and the graphics maybe won't be what you want in every case. So to make it a bit easier for you, I've made a family that you can use for a beam that you'll probably find a bit easier than the beam that you get under structure. Don't be afraid to use these. They do work really well, but again, they're a little bit harder than the one I'm going to show you. So to get the one I'm going to show you, I'm going to go to Architecture and then Component and then Load Family, and then I'll go to the Revit library on the P drive, and then the structural folder. So all I do, I'll just do that again. So again, Architecture, Component, and then Load Family, and then go to the Revit library on the P drive. So not the local library, in other words, the one that's on the P drive up here, and then Structural, and you'll see a few basic timber structural families that I've made for you. So there's one called Adjustable Box. That's actually really useful if you need something just box shaped. But I've made another one called Adjustable Timber Component, which is very similar, but it's got a timber material setup. So think about what a beam is. A beam essentially is a structural box. And, oh, here we go. It's good for you to see this. Sorry, I made a mistake, but it's good for you to see it. So have you seen this message come up before? I'll show you again. So, but have you seen this message before? when you go to place a family, and it tells you it can't place that family because it's the wrong category. So do you know what to do when you see that? That's right. But how do you change the category? That does work. I'll show you that in a second. That's one option, but there's another way. So I'm going to say the first thing is say no. So that then you can choose a different option. So it didn't work because it wasn't a component. I've changed the category. So to place it, you actually need to go to structure and use the beam option to place it. So I've turned it into a beam. So go to beam, and then it's the same. Load family, and then choose that family. Yep, beam, load family, and then just double click on adjustable timber component.
What was that before, like in the Revit library and then?
In structural. Yep. And then you'll see adjustable timber component. Just structural.
Yep, and then
adjustable timber component. Okay, so now I can see it. In my floor plan, as I'm placing it, I can see that it's there, so I know it's working. So, which way do the beams go? Which direction do the beams go in this building?
I think it's the way that you do.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah.
So, if it was the other way, you'd press space to rotate them, but it's actually going the right way, you're right. That's how it should be. Okay, so then, to see it, I'm just going to place one. And I'm going to place it over one of my grid lines. So it's centred on that grid. So you can see it there, there's my beam. Centred on the grid. Okay, so I made this family so that you can modify it really easily. So it's easiest, place it in plan first, and you'll see it in your floor plan. If you're thinking that it's too low, you are actually spot on. It is too low. But it's better this way. If we place it on the ground, modify it, and then we'll lift it up afterwards. So it's on my ground, on the floor.
So you put whatever in?
Yeah, just put it into the floor plan. That's right. And then you'll see I've made it so that you've got arrows at the end, and you can then stretch it using the arrows to change the length. So it's an adjustable family. You can just stretch it all the way to your walls and take it to the end of each wall or to the sides where you have the walls at each end. So that beam now is the full length of the building. So then I'm going to go to the section view that you can see here, this section. I'm going to double click on that arrowhead, and then I should be able to find the beam if I zoom into the right part of my floor plan. So you can see it there. Okay, so I've got my beam there sitting on the floor. Now, before I lift it up, I'm going to make it the right size. So I'll just have to switch back to my other file where I've got the sizes. Sorry, I've forgotten already what that measurement is.
Yeah, this one's on the floor, right?
Yep, that's right.
Is it 400, I think?
Yeah, it is, yeah. And then I'm just going to have a look at the one above that. So there's the beam. So it's actually a big square beam. It's 400 by 400. And then the joists sit on top of that, and they're 150. Okay, so how do we change the size of the beam?
Edit type?
Exactly, that's good. Yep, edit type. And looking at the list of sizes, we don't have the one we want. So what do we do to make a new size?
Duplicate?
Exactly, duplicate, yep, good.
400 times.
400, that's it. And then change the height and the width to 400. Okay, so then how do we move that up to sit at the right point?
And we just like press up, no?
You can, or you can click the move button, pick it up on the top, and then move it so that it touches the floor above.
I got it, yeah.
Now,
But you still have the gap.
that's right, there is still a gap. So it's good if you've noticed that. So what that tells you is that this this floor at the moment is a little bit thinner than it should be.
It's 150.
Yeah, it should be 150, but then we've got 20 mil for the flooring above that.
Okay.
So later we're going to put a beam in there, sorry, the joists in there for some parts, and the joists are 150. So I'm going to go to edit type. So I've just, if you missed it, I've selected the floor. I'll go to edit type.
Just select the floor, but it's
Yep.
just one floor, or it's going to be all of, all of
No,
the
just
floor?
select the one.
Select the one,
Yep.
Edit type.
Edit type, duplicate, and we're going to call this timber flooring. Edit the structure, and here I'll just to keep it simple, make the structure 170 for now.
Where's the edit structure?
You click edit next to structure, the first button that says edit.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
And
And then you can change the thickness to 170. So that's it. So I've made the floor now 20 mil lower.
yeah.
So I've got to select my beam and move it down. So again, if I select it and then click move, I can snap to the corner and then come down to snap to the new edge of the floor. And then you should see that the gap is there or is not there anymore. So the beam sits exactly on that that column.
Yeah. But then this one just for one floor.
That's right, exactly. Yep.
We need to do it one by one for the whole floor.
So the no, you don't need to do them one by one. Okay, so I've got that first beam. No, this is the wrong file. I'm just going to close this so it's not confusing. Okay, so back into my section. I've got the beam there sitting on top of the column. But we've got a lot of beams. So we don't have to do that for each one. So I'll start now by moving this over to the left. So I've selected my beam. I'm going to click move. This is good practice. If you're not using the move tool to move things, you're not doing it precisely. So use the move button, snap to the grid line. Yep, so pick it up on the centre line, or the grid line that that beam sits on, and then move it over to the first grid on the left. Yep. So that's now in the right place. So now I want to move it, I want to copy that for all of the columns that have the same spacing. Okay, now, well, let's just put in a dimension so that you can see if they're the same. They should be, but let's just double check. Yep, that's it. So see how all these spacings are the same. You shouldn't need to draw the dimension to see that, but it's not a terrible idea. It's up to you. You don't have to draw the dimension. I'm just doing that so that you can see they're the same. Okay, so then this is another great tool. If you're not using it, it should help you. The array tool. Yep.
But your thing is not exactly same, but my one is the bottom.
Yeah, you need to move it down 20. Oh no, yours. No, that's all right. Sorry, don't worry about that. I've got extra columns there. I've been doing different things. I'll just delete the extra ones, and then you can see. Mine should be the same as yours.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing other things. Yeah, don't worry about that. So yeah, good to notice, but that's fine. Okay, so here I'll select my beam, and then I'm going to click array. That's the button with the 4 squares. I'm going to snap to one of the grid lines, and then snap to the next one. So you'll see how useful a grid is here. And then type the number that I want. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beams. And there we are. Yep.
You mean like between two?
Okay, so I'm just deleting some extra columns so that it's not confusing when you look at it. Right, so you can see there we've got a beam above each of the, or on each of the grid lines.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to select all of the beams. So I'm going to right click on one, go to select all instances in entire project. So that's going to select all of the beams in the array. Right, all 6 of them. Now I'm going to click copy to clipboard. Yep. Then that's right, paste, align to selected levels. And I'm simply going to click and drag on every level except parapet and roof. We'll worry about those later. Maybe I'll choose roof just so that you can see the last, the last set of beams. Wouldn't hurt. Yep. So now the problem is the other beams are higher because those ceiling heights are different. So I'll show you a good way then to bring all of those beams down. I'm just going to click and drag across all of those levels except for ground floor. So that way I should have selected the beams that have the problem, but not the ones that were right on the ground floor. So I've selected a lot of other things as well though. So I'm going to go to filter, and then check none. Yeah, well you'd think they'd come up as structural beams, but they don't because we've done the array. So instead they come up as model groups. So yep, just tick model groups. And that should leave you with just the beams selected. Now I'm going to click move again and simply snap to the top of one of my beams and then snap to the bottom of the floor. So that's brought them down close to what we want, but remember then we've brought them down another 20 mil. So I'll click move again. This time I'll just click a base point in empty space and move down from that point and type 20. Yep. Yep, click anywhere. Then move down from there where you click. Just wherever you've clicked, move it down. So just click somewhere. Yep, move the cursor and you'll see the numbers come up and you can type 20. Yeah. I'll come have a look in a minute, but that's the last thing. So look, if you've understood all of that, you can use almost the same technique to do the joists. Now, I think it'll make more sense if I let you try that first and then we can come back to the joists afterwards. But maybe then I'll show you, here we go, we did end up with an extra row of beams. That's okay, I can delete them. And then you can see now that we've got the beams that are left sitting nicely on top of the columns. Right, and that should give you a good understanding of the structure of the building. Don't worry about my walls, they're going to be different to yours. And so that's maybe enough for now. Maybe I'll come back to you afterwards and we can look at the joists. But I'll just explain why you need to think about them at this point. Because you can see here, this is one of the shops on the ground floor where the beams are exposed. Yep. And you'll probably need to keep that. If you have a beam that's like this, it'll probably be exposed. But then the joists can either be concealed behind some lining like this, or they can be exposed. And remember the beam, it's just a box. So you can easily make a copy of that, duplicate it, and make a new one that's the size of the joist. Yeah, and just copy them the other way. But I'll maybe show you some examples of that later. But again, so why do you need to plan that out now? Why do you think I'm worrying about all of this structural detail?
Because it's an original building like that?
Pretty much, yeah. And so it's also a technical thing with Revit. If you do line the ceilings, so if you have it like this with some sort of lining, you can use the ceiling tool in Revit and then you can use the ceiling lights in Revit because those ceiling lights will attach to a ceiling. But let's say you want to do the more modern style of design where you leave the surfaces exposed. So you're not going to have a ceiling if the surfaces and the joists are exposed. Right? And so if that's the case, I might just show you the light family. I'm not going to show you the joist, but I will show you the family for the lights because you'll need that.
Sorry, then you might show me this 20 first so I can follow you after this.
I'll show you. Yeah, I'll come back and show you. Okay, so I just want to show you this family to finish off because these will help you in lots of parts of this building. So using a component again, load family, and then again the Revit library folder on the P drive. All the lights that I make I put into lighting fixtures. So then you can see here I've got some with names like here round unhosted spotlight and square unhosted downlight. So that word unhosted means that it doesn't need to belong to a ceiling.
Doesn't belong to a ceiling.
That's right.
Unhosted is in, yeah, okay.
Now it's still just like a ceiling light in the way it works, but the trick is it doesn't need a ceiling in Revit
You can put it anywhere.
for you to place it. That's right. So here, let's say I want it over this area. I'll place it first, and then I'm going to go to my section and find it. So there's the light I've just placed. So notice it's floating. It doesn't need to attach to a ceiling. And that actually makes it in some ways a lot more useful than a real ceiling light because you can just drag it wherever you want it to go, and if there's a beam or a joist instead of the ceiling, not a problem. You can still put it there and attach it to that by dragging it. So that's what I wanted to show you, so that when you start to think about your rendering and also your design, you're not limited by the way Revit wants you to do things.
You can just put the ceiling on.
Exactly.
400.
Put the ceiling on if you want it. That's right. And then you can have some, I think it'd be nice to have some areas where you've got a lined ceiling, and that can be a nice feature. So you get solid areas that'll have downlights maybe in a bulkhead, and that's a really beautiful design element that you can have. And then you can have some of the floor joists exposed to get the contrast between that nice finished defined area and a more, exposed area where the surfaces are exposed and you've got different style of lighting. Okay, so when you think about those things, hopefully that's enough though for you to at least put the beams in, because I think even if you're not going to have the ceiling joists exposed, or the floor joists really, most of you will need to show the beams.
But then you need something to follow. If I want to make the void in this building, is
Yeah.
that mean this beam it need to be re-added?
No, use the floor that's already there to start.
No, I mean like to void in the floor.
Oh, that's right. So yeah, that's why you also need to think about the structure at this point, because when you start putting voids in, you also need to cut through the beams.
Yeah, that's right.
So maybe I'll show you a void, because before you put the joists in, you probably should work out your voids as well.
Yeah.
So let's say I want a big void in this area. So have you all had a go at using the shaft tool? Shaft?
No.
So it's on the architecture tab.
Yeah.
You're all probably too young to remember Shaft the movie, even the second one.
I don't remember.
What? No, you would definitely know. The Samuel L. Jackson one, that was only about 5-10 years ago.
Okay, so shaft.
Anyhow, but the old one was in the 70s.
Is this one for making void?
So?
Is this one for making void?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so on the architecture tab, you've got the shaft tool. Okay, so with shaft, you draw the shape that you want to cut out. So maybe I'll do one with a rectangle through... Well, I'll start off just with this area. I might make it bigger later, but for now I'm just going to make it this area. That'll do. Okay, so I've drawn the shape. This is the area that I want from my void.
Okay. Can I make two in one go, or I need to do it one by one?
Best to do them one by one.
One by one.
Yeah. Okay, so I've drawn the area. Then I've got to come over and look at the height in properties. So it's on ground floor. That's okay. That's the level that I'm on.
I do have a best offset minus 100.
Yeah, so change it, make it always, or nearly always, you want that positive. So if it's negative, change it to 100 or 150.
Yep, to positive.
Yeah, yeah. And then the top constraint is how high you want it to go.
I want
So-
it to level 1.
Yeah, so just choose the top level. So here, I'll do the same. So I'll make it go to level 2.
So you want, this means it's like the void gonna be ground floor 1 and 2, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And then the top offset, 100 is probably good for that too.
Top of the, 100.
Yep. Okay, so now I'll finish that shaft with the tick, the green tick. Yep. Okay, so now how do I see that shaft?
You need to go to
You can go to 3D, there's a better way. Section, exactly. So in section, now I can see the shaft there, if I know what I'm looking at. So there's my hole in the floor. So what's going to stop that coming up? What's going to make it harder to see that? Well, you need to make sure your section is in the right place. So your section may not be going through the shaft. So there's my shaft. If I go back to the ground floor, here's my section line, and I know that's cutting that void. But if your section is in the right place, you might need to move it so that it's cutting through the void.
Oh, you need to cut it to the void.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so then also, if you're one of those people who always works with thin lines, you'll see now why that can be a problem.
But I know, is it like something like this?
So it could be thin lines.
Is it like that?
Yeah, that's right. So maybe it's easier in a shaded view as well. So if you go to shaded, it should make it easier.
Yeah.
And then also make sure thin lines is not turned on. You want the line weights here.
Okay.
And then you should be able to see it.
Yeah.
So then I can see that I've got a column sitting in the middle of that shaft. And do we want that?
No.
No. So we've got to delete the columns. So maybe to finish off, very last thing I'll show you for this. We'll come back and do the joists later. So there's my shaft. I want a view that's going to show that area. So I'll show you the trick. I'm going to rename the view that's got this name 3D in the brackets. I'm going to right click and rename.
So you go 3D to horizontal.
Yep. So I'm going to call that 3D default. So that's my original 3D view. Then I'm going to select my shaft. So it's invisible, but if you move your cursor over it, you can select it. So that's my shaft. And then I'm going to click this button up here, which is selection box. So next to the little red cross, you've got selection box.
Yeah.
Yep. So that makes a view that's cropping around the thing that's selected. And notice the name that it gives. It's the same as the name I had before. That's why I renamed the previous view. So how good's that? We've got a nice view there that shows us really clearly what's happening around that shaft and also what's happening inside it. Okay, so what would you do if you were wanting to make that a void?
You get it like to the, yeah.
So what would you take out if you were building this yourself? What would go?
I'm gonna take all of it out.
Yeah? So what's inside that void, in that shaft, that I want taken out? What about the columns?
Columns
Yeah,
and beam.
yeah, that's right. The columns can go, and you spot on the beams, that's right. So I can just delete the columns, no problem. Right, we don't want any floating columns, so we can take all of these out. Okay, so then, that's right, the beams. They're a bit more of a problem. What do we do about the beams? How do we edit those beams now? Well, I'll give you a tip. It's not that easy, but I'll show you. So to go back to if I go back to the floor plan, I can't see them anymore. Why can't we see them?
Because you did it.
No, I lifted them up. So after I placed them, I put them in the floor plan to start with, and then remember we lifted them up. So we can't see them in the floor plan anymore. So where can we see them now?
Yeah.
So we can't see them in the floor plan, but if we go to the ground floor ceiling plan, we should be able to see them. Yep. But I can't see them there either.
Yes, me too.
Now, there's a bit of a trick here. You've got a couple of settings. So I'm going to change this option here to find. And I still can't see them.
Yeah.
Right? But you should still set it to find. So then there's another step. Go to Visibility Graphics over in Properties. So it's this button over here, the first edit button in View Properties.
So you're still in the ceiling plan ground floor?
Yeah, in the ceiling plan.
Yeah.
And then you'll see by default, if you scroll down, structural framing's turned off. This one's structural framing.
So you go to visibility, edit,
Yep,
and
yep.
then
Structural framing. Just turn it back on.
structure framing. Yeah, it's
That's it.
not picked, and then you
Yep.
have to pick it.
Yep, that's it. And then OK.
Yes,
And now I can see the beams.
yes.
Okay, so there's my void. So, now, this is where you do need to understand a little bit about structures. You don't need to be structural engineers, but you need to still think about it when you're doing interior design. You can't just take away things and leave them floating in space.
Okay.
They won't stay up. So you need to work out how it's going to be held up. So I know Ivana's told you that you can take out some columns, but that doesn't mean you can just take them out and not think about what needs to be there
So I'm
instead.
going to change it to wall.
Yeah, you can have a wall, but there's another option. So here, if I want to have a nice, let's say this is my void. So what might I want to have around the void? If you were going to design a hotel, or if you wanted to stay in a hotel, right, and there's a nice big beautiful void that runs through the middle of the building.
Yes.
What do you want around that void? What would you want? The balcony, right? You'd want balustrade so you can see it. You don't want to have solid walls around the void,
Yeah.
right? You want to be able to see this thing. So we need the floor to go around those columns.
Yes.
So that's why I've left a gap. Instead of putting the void up against the columns, I've left a gap. That's one approach. You can do that. So if we're going to do that, then there's the beam here. So I want to stretch this beam so that it's shorter. Right? But I can't. And you'll see this all the time. When you select something in Revit and you see a dashed line, what does that mean? If you select something and you see a dashed line around it, it tells you up here, it means it's a group. So when you see something and it gives you a dashed line, you know straight away it's a group. If you need to change it, the best option, a bit like AutoCAD, ungroup. Just a bit like explode. So I'm going to ungroup it. And now, again, because of the way I made it for you, you can just stretch the end to make it go where you want it to go. How easy is that? So I get the next one, ungroup, and then stretch it. Now, if you've tried the structural beams, which I did show you before, they're a bit harder. This one should be easier. So I've got the two beams either side. Now I'll click Mirror Pick Axis and just flip it over that void, and I'll leave it at that for now. I'll give some time to try these things, so it won't mean much.
But the other side going to be empty with no...
Well, that's why I mirrored them. So I just mirrored the beams to get some new beams there for the other side. But it's good if you're thinking about that, because you're spot on. That's right. Okay, so there now, if you look in the 3D view, there's a true void with the beams taken out either side.
Yeah.
So I'd need to do the same on the next level. Right, these two beams.
So you said you mirror it.
Yeah,
Mirror the next one. You can't just copy it.
you could copy them, but mirror is a bit easier, I think.
Mirror, because mine will have the different side. Mirror, I can do that.
Yeah, mirror or copy, they both would work. Yeah, up to you. Okay, so that's it. And then just remember, you need to do that on each level where you have a shaft.
Yeah.
And in a way it's good that you're forced to make the building the way it's going to be built, because then you can actually treat this as a design exercise and think of nice ways of detailing that. Okay, so I'm not explaining what I'm doing, but you can see they're the next steps that I've just done to get the next level done.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but Benny, this is mine.
Good, perfect. That's perfect. Yep, excellent. That's good. That's perfect, really good. Okay, so that's it. So now I'm going to give you some time to try those things, and if you can, that would be good. If you can then think about your joists, which will be exposed, or if you're going to have any that are exposed. That's great. So give you some time.